I'm going to start with our moderator. Today's moderator is Michelle Awad. She is our newest employee add to the University YMCA. She's our Student Engagement Program Coordinator, and she is very excited to moderate today's panel. She's great if you're a student, even if you're a non-student, but especially if you're a student and you haven't met Michelle yet, make sure that you take the time to do that. She's here for you. Next up, we have Dr. Cora Maldonado. She is with the Department of Anthropology at the University of Illinois. We are also joined today by Dr. Guerra Perez, who is Assistant Chancellor for Diversity and Academic Inclusive Excellence at the University of Illinois. And finally, the Y's very own Gloria Yen, who is Director of our New American Welcome Center here at the University YMCA. Now I'm going to turn things over to Michelle, but we're going to have our panelists tell you a little bit more about themselves, which is why I gave such short introductions. But we're going to go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah? I'm holding this very close. So welcome to Friday Forum. I want to thank our panelists for being here today. And I just want to make clear that we can go in whatever order you like, but if we could start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do around immigration justice and welcoming work in the community.
I'll start as I'm the first one over here. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you here. And before I start, I also want to make sure we can acknowledge that we're native lands, and I think part of the conversation we're having here has to do with thinking about the Americas as a whole, right? And immigration inextricably intertwined with this, with the different regimes of dispossession throughout the Americas. So thank you for being here, and provecho, as we say in Spanish. Have a good meal. So I'm a professor in anthropology, and most of my work is directly linked to some of my research, but most of it, what I do is more principally out of just love for my communities here and in Mexico and everywhere. Well, two things I'm doing with respect to immigration justice is, just to introduce myself, one is thinking in the context of the university, trying to figure out meaningful engagements between the students, the communities that are here at the university, and our community at large. I think those bridges are very important to build, and there's a lot of people that are doing that, but we haven't, I think we still have a long road to go along those lines. So thinking about engagements between students and communities, between how to think about those engagements, the difficulties of it, the ethics of it, and trying to figure out the challenges of today, which are very different from 10 years ago or 20 years ago in relationship to building those bridges across university and the local community here in Champaign, right? The other one is thinking about working with, we're trying to develop right now, in collaboration with some Maya-speaking community members and organizations in the CU Fair Immigration Forum, and colleagues from EIUC, different colleagues across the university, a collective for that's a Maya Interpretation and Language Collective. So we're in the process of trying to build that, as is one of the key issues I think is important today in the context of the logics of immigration here in Champaign, Illinois. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. I work on campus, and my area, I think that each one of us have different approaches and different priorities, and I started doing this work with immigrants and particularly undocumented and subsequently DACA students since probably early 2000 as a grad student. First in the state of Kentucky, then Indiana, and now here at Illinois. And it's about access, and it's about human rights, and how the issue of documentation becomes an obstacle for many individuals and many immigrants to achieve what should be a right for everybody, which is education, higher education. Of course, we have to look at these from different angles, different perspectives, either through policy, practices, institutional barriers, but also through world aspects such as displacement, globalization, climate, and political and economical situations in individuals' country or people's countries. So here on campus, I focus on trying to help undocumented, documented students and students whose identities often are not visible, to try to get them access to education. It's not easy. We could talk about so many students who have gone through this process and have been able to graduate from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, but I can also talk about students who have been here for 2, 3, 4 semesters and have not been able to graduate. I can also talk about students who have been admitted and have not been able to enroll because there is no funding for them. I can talk about families who have been separated because of immigration laws in which a mom and a younger sibling is in Mexico and a daughter is here in trying to make a living for her and her siblings. So, all that is happening with our students on campus. So that's part of the work that I do, among other stuff. Access and higher education are, for me, the two priorities. And as I said, there are others who work with community organizations, recent immigrants, others work with refugees, asylees, unaccompanied minors. And the great thing about this is that at least many of us are working in different aspects, because a lot of families and communities are impacted by previous and current immigration laws, because this is not just something that happened 2 years ago.
Hi, I'm Gloria here at the Y, and with the New American Welcome Center program that we have, we're actually one of 15 New American Welcome Centers nationwide that are being piloted by YMCA of the USA, and a lot of our daily work, what that looks like is just pursuing the thriving and flourishing of immigrant communities and immigrant families here in Champaign County. And so that means across a wide range of different legal statuses from many different countries, whether on campus or off campus. We do this through a combination of direct and referral services to bridge the gap to resources in the community through a immigrant helpline, also through immigration legal services, also through providing a pathway to citizenship and other resourcing issues. We also do a lot to convene partners, organizations, the people here in this room to really mobilize additional resources and conversations and connections about, how can we really make Champaign County a place where immigrants are able to pursue the economic and educational opportunities that are here for them but may not be accessible, and how can they really feel a meaningful sense of belonging here.
Thank you for those introductions. As you all mentioned, you're all working in different parts of the Champaign-Urbana community in different contexts. So my question is, what are you seeing as someone deeply engaged in this work, and what are some of the stories that need to be told?
I can start. So just to talk a little bit about the landscape of our local community that some of you may not know. So here in Champaign County, we're home to about 24,000 immigrants. 14,000 of those immigrant individuals live actually primarily off campus, are raising their families, making their lives, working in our communities, and navigating a lot of different types of issues. Immigrants in our community, like I said, have a wide range of different legal statuses, and they also come here from over 70 different countries around the world. So 24,000 as a share of the Champaign County population, that's about 1 in every 9 people. And so even just looking around the room today, you may not often think when you're at the store, at the post office, or in class, et cetera, that you may be amongst a lot of foreign-born people, but immigrants in our community are out and about. You know, they're not necessarily hidden in the shadows. They are deeply embedded into the livelihood of our community, and they come here for all sorts of different reasons, whether it's to pursue safety, to reunite with their family, to pursue education at a world-class institution, and some of them are really successful and are able to fulfill some of their ambitions. Others are really isolated and really struggling for survival. And what we're trying to do with the New American Welcome Center right now, one of our initiatives is working with local stakeholders from nonprofits and local businesses, municipalities, et cetera, to really develop a welcoming plan for Champaign County. So thinking about, what is needed at a systems level to really create long-term change for our communities, whether that's with regard to the health and well-being of our communities, whether that's with regard to their ability to access immigration relief, whether that is any language, addressing language barriers, things like that. And so one of the ways that we are really listening to and learning and trying to see what is happening in our community, in addition to our immigrant helpline, which kind of acts as our pulse on the community, is we are doing a series of community engagement sessions. So we're conducting listening sessions within the immigrant communities to really understand what their experiences are, particularly with regard to just what's your experience like in Champaign or Urbana or the county at large? What have your experiences been with transportation, navigating healthcare, education, et cetera? And also on each of your seats is a questionnaire survey that we've also been distributing to really get some baseline markers of immigrant integration so that we can set some priorities for action. And so just to share some of the initial learnings that we've had from that, we at this point have had over 300 people complete the survey. About 2 in every 3 are foreign-born, and the age range is about from 18 years old to 77, coming from 23 different countries. And some of the things that have stood out as challenges to starting a new life in Champaign County have been learning English, being really far away from your family and friends, and also finding employment. And access, or I guess workforce integration and opportunity is a really big challenge in our community. Many of the survey respondents and the people that we work with on a daily basis are working in jobs that do not match with their training. So for example, we have people who are trained as, nursing professionals, other types of healthcare professionals, lawyers, et cetera, who are here working in our factories and our packing plants. We also have people who may not have been super well educated in their sending countries, but don't really have opportunities to higher education here. Some of the top stressors that are facing our community, kind of compounding what I just shared right now, are healthcare services, education, and housing. And so those are some of the top trends that we're seeing. And then just, I guess, I'll try to stop. But with regard to things that we most directly engage with at the New American Welcome Center, serving primarily low-income and indigent communities, is just the need for access to immigration assistance and relief. And so that's something that we've been addressing through pursuing DOJ accreditation and receiving it from the Department of Justice, also partnering with a lot of fantastic local legal organizations and attorneys, several of whom are in the room today.
So as I mentioned, part of my job on campus is to try to provide access. And when we talk about access, it's about opportunities as well as financial support for our undocumented and documented students. So some of the things that we have worked in the last couple of years with many other colleagues across the state was the RISE Act that finally got passed in the Senate, and it was signed by Governor Pritzker and will be in place by January 2020. So now what we're working on internally is to in the process of how that is going to be implemented is a state law. So we are working with with ISAC because they will be the ones who will be giving us the instructions how these new forms will be created for those students who are undocumented, documented, transgender, as well as those students who have a cap in the number of credit if they are enrolled, and sometimes when the students transfer, they already have 75 credit hours, so they are not able to receive financial aid. So there will be a little bit more funding in that aspect. So right now, I cannot provide a lot of information how we're going to implement that because we're waiting on guidance from ISAC, and we hope that by mid-October, early November, we will be able to have a more detailed information how we're going to implement that on our campus. In terms of our internal campus platform, we're working with the Illinois Coalition Assisting Undocumented Students, and a couple of those students are here right now, and they know that today we have a deadline because we are going to, last semester, the Illinois Student Government, as well as ICOS and a couple of other groups, they, in the referendum about the HOPE scholarship, which is to provide fee money for a scholarship for DACA students, transgender students, and as well as some international students whose lives might be impacted by either political instability in their home countries or a climate-related crisis. Those students sometimes go through a lot of obstacles to get funding to cover one semester, and then if they are not able to pay some or certain fees, then they are their visa is terminated because they are not enrolled. And it's more complex than that, but what I wanted to say is that there are a group of students that sometimes need some sort of emergency on financial needs. So we're working on making sure that that referendum that passed overwhelmingly during the spring semester, 70% of the students approved that scholarship fee. There is still a couple of more steps that we need to take in order for that to be implemented, but we're finalizing our presentation and proposal to submit that today, and hopefully by next couple of weeks or months, depending on how long it takes, we will know if we will be able to provide more funding for our students on campus. Another thing that we are currently doing is the university now has an immigration law clinic, which is going to help us a lot. We struggle in the last couple of years to provide simple support for many of our DACA undocumented students, such as filling out their FAFSA renewal. Sometimes they will have to go back to Chicago or try to get somebody who could help them to fill out the form. We had a system in place thanks to the Latina Alumni Association. They had some immigration lawyers and they were helping us in a case-by-case basis. However, now having somebody on campus who can help our students, as I said, just to review the DACA renewal application is going to be really helpful. And we're also joining many higher education institutions in their fight. As many of you might know, DACA is going to be in the Supreme Court soon, so the university has joined more than 100 institutions across the nation to file for an amicus brief in support of the DACA. So that's something that the APLU, HACU, the National Organization Higher Education and Immigration are doing from different fronts to provide foundations for us to fight what might be a very hard case in the Supreme Court in a couple of months. And that's something that our students are very concerned about what could happen after DACA gets the hearing at the Supreme Court. It's not a very friendly Supreme Court at this moment, so of course our students are concerned about what could be the outcome of that particular situation.
Okay, so we're all, speaking from our distinct kind of experiences. So mine goes a little bit in a different way, in that one of the things I'm seeing that needs to be talked about and thought about more in the current moment is, because again, this is part of what I engage in, is on, we really need to engage in a meaningful conversation around indigenous peoples on the move, communities that are moving and crossing borders throughout the Americas and beyond, right? It really requires to talk about, that's why I started with acknowledging native lands. We really need to talk about the larger structures, right? Identifying the demographics of immigration have shifted, and a lot of different indigenous people on the move are in the United States, right? And it requires different kind of understanding and approaches to a lot of things, right? Including language, but also including the way, ways indigenous people have been constructed as peoples, right? And how the different nation states have their own histories of dispossession in Mexico and Guatemala and El Salvador. And the different ways we think about these communities, we talked about these communities, we understand these communities. I think that's something we need to engage with. As Latino, Latina, Latinx communities as well, we have to have a meaningful kind of conversation around our engagement with that issue, right? Because there's racial hierarchies that cut across all nation states and all communities and all cities, and those, I think, are something we need to really kind of engage with, and it's something that is still kind of, I think, in progress, and it's more and more there. I think there's very wonderful, successful collaborations across the U.S. in terms of Latino, Latina, Latinx communities and indigenous communities and organizations, but we need more, right? And we need, again, across different constituencies. So how do they fit into this narrative, right? And how do they fit into this narrative of Latin American migration, right? It's usually, that's part of the problem that is kind of emerging constantly, right? People think, anything beyond the south of the border is a Spanish speaker, right? And no, it's very complex, right? And we need to really kind of talk about that and kind of, have conversations among us, but also with the communities that are here, right? Also as a way of understanding, because their experiences might be very different from others, right? So just putting kind of that conversation on the table at the forefront is, for me, kind of critical, right? And also, pointing to the richness and wealth that these communities have brought, right? Also, not just only talking about, the ongoing kind of violence and all the bad things that we tend to kind of focus on because we want to figure out ways out of it, but also what are things that are positive that are emerging, right? What are the interactions that are happening between indigenous communities and others, right? And how can we replicate that across the country, right? And we need to talk about this together. I think that's one of the principal issues for me, right? Among us and among the communities that are here in part of our community, right?
Thank you. I wish that we had double the amount of time that we do for Friday Forum because this conversation is so rich. I want to combine these next two questions because you've touched a lot about, you've touched on the important issues that immigrants in this community are facing right now. Gloria, you mentioned this mismatch between people's skills and the jobs that they have, and access to housing, education, whether that's in the high schools or in higher education here at the U of I. I'm wondering if you can tell us how the current political climate has impacted your work and the immigrants in our community. And you have this room full of people right here, right now. What is important to tell them? What needs to be demystified to this audience?
You said my name. Okay. So I would say that, as we all know, the administration has been putting up a wall that is perhaps not physical but very palpable through different proposed changes that will limit the access of mixed status families to things like public housing, that will limit the ability of people to access public benefits through things like the finalized public charge rule, and that really just through things like even the proposed citizenship question that was not approved are really having a serious chilling effect in our community, and a serious chilling effect on people's desire to participate and engage civically, ability to feel safe wherever they are, and to really contribute a lot of that richness that Cora was alluding to our communities. And so, yeah, I would just with the political climate, I just want to, just the chilling effect to emphasize that's something that is very real and affecting our communities right now. And the other thing is just, in addition with that, as people who are working in the immigrant justice space, a lot of our day-to-day, I think here at the New American Welcome Center, feels like varying degrees of whiplash, right? So on one hand, we're trying to work towards sustainable change and call institutions into accountability and educate people and raise the visibility of immigrant stories in our community. And then on the other hand, we have to be reactive. We have to be responding to what's happening. And so just the tension between really being able to capitalize on community energy to raise the visibility of issues, to make legislative change, for example, and then also the need to really focus on digging deep for work that is going to really benefit families to come. So I think that's the dynamic that we're constantly in, and it makes it hard to figure out what the best way to engage in is on the ground.
I'll just I'll just jump in because I kind of had some similar answer. It's in the current moment, it just seems like we're trying to create collaboratively spaces that are self-sustainable, and we end up getting backtracked by all this ongoing kind of putting fires off, right? And I think that really affects, and not only that, the communities kind of retract, right? So maybe we were collaborating certain things and we're moving forward, and then it's no longer there because it's definitely a different moment, you know? So we have to constantly have it rearranging the plan, right? You have to kind of make the plan again and over and over and over and over again. So it's like 3 steps, back, 1 forward, 3 steps back and forward. We're still walking, right, forward, but it's a very complicated kind of equation. I'll leave it here and maybe I'll jump in again. I just wanted to kind of.
So in terms of the political climate, I think it's important to understand that communities of colors has experienced exclusion, segregation, relocation throughout their history in this country, and probably many others. But I'm talking specifically about the current political climate in the US. I'm just going to talk about that particular aspect. So, we are living in this moment, but for those who have a little bit of understanding that many of the things that we are experiencing today are not new. It's like cyclical. From the start of the inception of, even before the US became the US, there was, there were exclusionary practices on who could come and who will be able to be here. Also for those who were already here, who are our indigenous nations, they were excluded, they were relocated, they were forced out of their own land. So all those practices has been in place historically. So one of the things that I get surprised sometimes when people get surprised of what are some of the things that are happening. And these things are not new. So let's just look, for sake of time, a couple of them. I mean, remember, citizenship. Only white males were able to become citizens of this country when the U.S. became the U.S. in, right after 76. Later, we had exclusionary immigration policies. We excluded individuals because of their ethnicity, because of their race, because of their color of skin. I mean, we excluded Chinese. There's the Chinese Exclusion Act. We excluded people with disabilities. 1909, we put quotas on the people who could come, 1921, 1924. We didn't change the Chinese Exclusion Act until, after World War II. We didn't reform until probably 1964, 65. So a lot of these, Native American couldn't even become citizens, so probably the Indian Act, I think it's 1924, I don't have all the dates, there are too many. But what I'm saying is that all this, it's not that this is new. We are seeing it news because we might have not experienced, some of our generation might not have experienced that, but previous generation have experienced that exclusionary immigration practices. And nowadays, what we're seeing that there are some exclusionary practices and policies in place that are being created and implemented and becoming law, and we are excluding people because of their religious belief, which we had done in the past. Maybe it's a different group. It depending who is a threat, who is considered a threat to this idea of too many different people. And there's this fear. So we have fear of those who are different from us. We have fear of those who speak a different language. We have fear of those who, maybe profess a different religion. We are fear because they are going to change us. So we base a lot of the stuff that is happening right now on fear. And that's going back to some of the things that my colleagues were saying here. We become reactive. We become reactive. Basically, we don't learn from history because a lot of this history has been hidden from a lot of us, right? So, it's important that we talk about these things from the context of how, other communities of colors or other communities in the past survive, because they survive, they are here. So it's important that sometimes we reflect back, what were some of those practices, policies, or group organizations that occur for making those changes? Yes, we might go 4 steps back and 1 forward, 3 steps, I don't know why you said something like that. But, we have been doing that for centuries. And I'm just talking about the US. I could go and talk about any other country or any other region in the world, and we may be doing very similar things, right? Immigration is an issue that affects us globally. We are humans. We move. That's our nature. We try to look for something better. Tell me somebody in this room who doesn't try to look for something better for them and their family. You all will do it. So those new immigrants that are coming here, the ones who came 100 years ago or 400 years ago, well, some of them that came 400 years ago came to colonize us, which is different. So we have to look at these things how they are. So for me, it's important that the political climate, yes, but we have lived in this political climate, in this fear for centuries, and we have not been able to, we have made progress. Yes, we have. The fact that 4 women are up here talking to you all, we have made progress. Maybe 200 years ago, we could have never. So I think that the only thing that I want to say is that we should not become numb and thinking that somebody else is going to do it, because it doesn't affect me. If you're a U.S. citizen, immigration laws doesn't affect you. Well, who knows? Maybe they are taking citizenships away now. But they could. But if you're a citizen, you're a second generation or third generation, and you're not involved in this, it might not affect you because it doesn't affect you. For those of us who are immigrants, and some of us, like me, very privileged, recognize the privilege of being an immigrant with a lot of privilege like myself, and recognize that and understand that the experience of every other single immigrant is very different. and value that experience and not only look for the negative aspects of it, as Cora was talking earlier. Look at the value of those individuals. Just the fact that it's a human being has value.
Can I just say one little thing that I missed? I also want to just part in the political context. I think we need to also see it as G already mentioned it, but we need to see it as in a global context. I think that's very important because otherwise we kind of stay locally and we talk about, basically, ¿cómo se dice curitas? Band-aid. We talk about, we're doing like we're just covering the little, cut of the moment rather than, it's again this reactive kind of sense, and we need to engage with that work. We need to engage with international kind of policy. We need to push, because whatever happens to the communities here is gonna affect the communities back at home. Because these communities are transnational. They're not cut off their families, right? And I think understanding that very tight connection to their home and to their communities and to their logics over there. And I wanted just to mention this. I had a chance to go to Guatemala and talk to many people there, but some of the authorities that are in the struggle for land, they are the struggle against mining. And I was trying to figure out what was their sense of, in my mind, my understanding, migration kind of lessened the power of these struggles at home, right? And they're like, no, they're actually our bloodline, right? These struggles are tied together, and I think we need to see them globally. Whatever happens here is going to affect back home. Whatever happens over there is going to affect back here. So I think seeing it structurally, seeing it in a larger context is key. And I think that's the work we're trying to do, all of us, but keep mentioning it to remember, right? What's happening in Latin America, what has happened in Latin America historically, right? The multiple US interventions, imperialism throughout the world, all that, right? We need to constantly be cognizant of that and recognize it as a key element to understanding the current moment.
Thank you. So in our last about 5 minutes before we move into our question and answer, I want to mention that this Friday Forum's theme is Women Rise Up. So can you talk a little bit about how the challenges in immigration impact women differently? Yeah, I guess that's my question, and the types of resilience involved. So.
I mean, I can start really quickly just because I know we're running out of time, but I mean, women on the move, indigenous women on the move, women on the move in general, do have different challenges, right? As we know, crossing through Mexico, crossing through Central America, crossing seas, and those we need to recognize and engage with those as well as the different responsibilities and structures or borders they have to cross, including, if you're a woman migrating to the U.S., there's certain stigma already on you because you left your family, right? And they not only have to battle already the complexities of immigration, but also ideas of what the woman should do or not do, or what should be back home, right? So there's ongoing border crossings that are very complicated, and I think it exacerbates that experience as you move through different countries.
I guess to build off of that, I just have a few kind of snapshots of local women that we work with regard to the challenges that they face, the burdens that they carry in their role as women, as immigrants, as sometimes the primary child care provider, the primary financial provider for their families, and kind of the implications of that. And so there's one woman that we're working with that is currently pregnant, and she is single, she has 2 other children, and she's been trying really hard to apply for a visa for her sister to come and join her in the country to help with post-delivery. And she's now about a week out from her due date. The visa application has been denied, and she doesn't know how she's going to kind of navigate that process post-birth here in the United States without any family members and really without a strong community. And so I think that's a burden that she bears. And I don't know much about this, but I think the kinesiology department here at the U of I just released a report on specifically the mental health trauma and stress that Latina women carry. And so even just thinking about this woman who is actually from the Congo, and the stress of the daily living that informs the development of, a human in your womb, right? So that is one example. Another is just a lot of the different types of cultural contexts that people bring, the way that partnerships are different, marriages are different, power dynamics are different, gender dynamics are different. And so what does that mean when you leave your home country and you come to this country and suddenly you find yourself in an unsafe situation, in a situation where you need to leave your home, but you don't speak the language, you don't have any financial security or independence, and you don't know how to extricate yourself from a violent situation. And so that's another thing that I think women need to figure out, or have the burden of figuring out how to navigate that. And so that's another thing in which gender is at play. And ultimately, when I think about my own context and thinking about the fact that, in Champaign County, most of the immigrants in our community, not just international students, but just across the board, foreign-born members of our community actually come from East Asia and Southeast Asia, in areas of, like India, for example. And the different cultural contexts that they bring in with them there. Concepts of honor and shame and saving face. And what does that mean? And how does that impact the way that you as a woman seek resourcing? How does that impact the way that you are vulnerable, your ability to trust in institutions? And how does that impact our ability to be able to even know what your story is and raise the visibility of it so that we can address some of the things alongside of you. So those are, I think, some of the dynamics that are at play. And so with a lot of the members of the East Asian community that we've worked with, I think saving face on behalf of your community and suffering kind of in silos is really, really isolating for our local community. And so just with the current political climate and the humanitarian crises that's happening at the border, I just want to say that, let's not forget the other stories that are also present.
Okay, I want to thank all of our panelists. If we could give them a round of applause. So now we'll take questions from the audience. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll come around with the mic.
The best I can. Can you hear me? Okay. So the issue came up about the current political context. I really appreciated the historical kind of understanding of what's happened in this country and around the globe. I've been around for the better of 7 decades, and it may be my ignorance, but I feel like even in that context, today is different. In this country, I don't know globally nearly as well. And I guess I know that we've taken steps backward in the past. I haven't felt that we've had a tsunami of steps backward the same way we are today. And I guess more than anything, I hear about this false equivalence kind of scenario that often comes up in today's politics. And I'm wondering, do you see today as being, especially if you've studied history, because again, that's not my strength, do you see today as different? Because for me, in my 7 decades, today feels different. The last couple of years feel quite different in terms of an onslaught that, again, it may be my ignorance, but I've kind of kept up with the news over the years, and I just feel it's different now, and it scares me. So, I'd like to hear what yours.
You know, I think that before the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, we had a period of I would say somehow a stable situation when it comes to immigration. Previous to that particular act, there were a lot of things that are pretty similar to what we are experiencing today. Like in the Quota Act, for example, in 1924, excluded people from pretty much everywhere in the world. You know, we created a quota for people coming to this country from specific places. And let's think about most of those who could come were from Europe. So we were very specific who could come. And even if you were coming from South Africa, for example, and the quota was very small, the ones who could come were the ones who were white. So we have had this type of discriminatory practices in the past. And if the Chinese Exclusion Act is not seen as something really dramatic, for it lasted more than 65 years, and when we excluded a group from an entire country or ethnicity not to be able to come, not to be able to even become citizens. So for me, I understand that from the historical perspective, in the last couple of decades, things have been a little bit different. We had a reform, during the Reagan administration that also allowed many undocumented families to become legal permanent residents through a specific process. And we didn't have anything else probably until the DACA. There were a couple of other things in between, but DACA helped many undocumented youth, to have a work permit. What I am seeing is that social media plays a huge role in what we are experiencing right now, and we are becoming more aware of some of these things. There has been other, administrations that have done very bad things when it comes to immigration. But, unless we go to the Library of Congress you can read all this stuff, but those were pretty, we brought millions of slaves from Africa who could not become citizens in this country, even though their kids were born in this country. So those are pretty drastic things related to immigration. And we're talking about millions of people. Right now, we are also not saying that we're not, and we are not. What we experience is it's coming every single day there is something. And I think that's why I say let's not become numb of this situation. Because one thing that you are right is the fact that it seems like, oh my God, yes, it does. And I think it's because the other one, it looks at a history and a period of time, a long period of time. And now what we're seeing is probably a lot of stuff thrown to us, every month. So it does feel that way. And I agree with you in that sense. But in terms of the practices, the policies, and the laws, no, they are not different. That's my personal opinion, but somebody might have a different one, and it's okay to disagree with me.
I also think it's important to find those threads of continuity because otherwise we die in the process. I think for me, it's important to see the way we have made it through as a person of color, as a woman. And those are kind of what keeps you going, right? And they might feel terrible, but then we have to look back and say, well, family separation has been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. Family separation starts not at the border, starts, once that person leaves home, right? Family separation, it's been historically, there. And we have the narrative now, and it does seem exacerbated because I think media plays a big role. I also think there is a different context. I'm thinking environmentally, the way people, the reasons why people migrate, the numbers why people migrate are definitely, or are on the move, have shifted, right? And that's very real, right? We just saw the Bahamas, right? Is that how you say it in English? That's
Bahamas,
yeah. The Bahamas, right?
I would say climate plays a huge role. If we don't talk about climate, if we don't talk, then, you cannot separate globalization, climate, displacement, and immigration. If you do, then there is something in that equation that is not working. So all that are related, and maybe that's why we see these masses of people moving.
Thank you. I just want to say a quick reminder to fill out to please fill out the community surveys on your seat if you haven't already. And Casey has that basket that you could place in there. Does anyone else have a question?
Hi, I'm Mahi. I'm an international student here, and like growing up, I lived in a society that was very patriarchal, monarchy style, and like I knew growing up that if I wanted to do anything, like as a woman in that society, I had to like leave and come to somewhere else for like higher education, and as women that had to immigrate yourselves. Like, is that something you grew up knowing, or is that something that like came upon you out of nowhere?
Are you talking to me? Okay.
Whoever wants
Because
that.
I actually don't.
So I
Go ahead.
wasn't, so the question is, what was the question?
Is that something you grew up knowing that you had to immigrate out of your home country?
No. In my experience, no. I came here because I got a scholarship to come, and actually I went back to my country. So in my experience, as at the beginning I say, I feel very privileged, and I recognize that. So the reason why I'm here is because, different experience, but no, that wasn't something for me. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say likewise. I'm actually second generation from Taiwan, and my dad came here for grad school, and his parents sent him here because of educational opportunity, and so that was always the plan from the time he was very, very young. And the reason that my family chose to stay was for sustained educational and economic opportunities for myself and my sister.
And I wanted to just quickly, maybe related to that, had different opportunities, but I think in my experience, there is experiences and dynamics from our own cultures that I battle, right? As I work with communities, as I engage with my family, as I engage with my extended family, as I engage with my people in my family in Mexico. But those are there, and it is statistically true that women do migrate because of gender violence or similar issues. And one of the questions at the end was, so what can you say? I kind of prepared this, I want to say it. I think, what's something that needs to be said to the people that are supporting these struggles and the like? And I think it's important to make space for people of color, make space for women of color. I think that's something that we need to learn to do, right? I'm in the process of learning myself, right? I think we need to learn to do that and to deeply listen to the different stories and the different ways that are being told. And in that sense of women, the spaces that women are building throughout the world are amazing, right? There's a Zapatista movement, the Zapatista conference coming up in December, so I'm putting out there so people go. Just for women, right? But there's spaces that are being built along those lines. It's just for women because we want to have that space on our own.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I was going to say that I saw this article that said that the next generation is going to be filled with Latina women, and we are going to be like the majority and within the next few decades. So my question is, what advice do you have for like a young woman like me or like other brown and black women who are trying to pursue careers similar to like immigration and working in government policy, trying to make a change? What advice would you have for us for today's issues going on and everything?
That's hard. Start that one. I'll finish.
So I always advise my students to get an education. That is extremely important. And I know that there is a lot of weight that we, as our Latinas and women in general, because there are Gloria was saying, there are so many identities and experiences that we go through that it's really hard for many of us to accomplish what we want. Not that we don't have the desire, nor that we don't have the capacity, because we have both. So surrounding yourself with people that can help you to achieve that. Sometimes we, and I'm gonna speak on my own understanding of my own Latinidad, because it's different and it's important to say that, we try to do things on our own and we don't seek help, or we are afraid to ask for, because we are, I grew up in a culture in which my grandmother and my mother, you can do it. I mean, go and do it yourself. Agarra agua del pozo. I mean, it's true. That's what we are built on. And sometimes we forget to ask for help. And sometimes in an environment like this one, in which we have to learn how to navigate a lot of things, because this is not the environment we grew up, at least in my case, getting connected with people that can help you to move forward. Because it is true, demographics are changing. I'm not sure about the fact that we're gonna be, I think that the minority will be the majority in, nationally. I don't think we're gonna get to be the majority maybe like in 100 years, but yeah, we will be probably the majority in terms of all our minority status right now. But that is my advice to you. Keep looking for what you feel that you can make the change, and sometimes you will find roadblocks on the way, and then when that happens, if you cannot overcome that on your own, seek for help, look for help, and somebody's gonna give you a hand to be able to move to the next level. So that will be my advice to you.
A community, that's my same thing. I only thrive in community. I can't do it by myself. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. I don't like the feeling. I don't think it's as productive. I don't think I move forward in the same way. So yeah, you see community, and I think we're all out there trying to establish contact, right? Maybe not necessarily always online. I think that we kind of lost that face-to-face contact, but I think we're here. I think this is a very supportive community, and I appreciate that a lot. Yeah.
Anyone else have?
Hey, does this even work? Okay, hi. So a little earlier, much earlier, y'all were talking a little bit about housing and employment, kind of getting really into the specific Champaign-Urbana context for migration. I'd like to hear a bit more about that, especially when it comes to challenges, because we're in an academic/community space right now. A lot of people who have power to do certain things, change certain things to actually make the space more welcoming instead of kind of putting that pressure on you guys. So what can these people here do?
Housing and employment. Wow.
So Shibun, the questions around housing and uh-huh.
What is it about the space here that can be actually more welcoming?
Well, I haven't made a plug for interning at the New American Welcome Center yet, but that is one way. With regard to, but seriously, in terms of, what are we doing with the things that we're finding from engaging the community, from the direct and referral services that we're providing, how are we using that to advocate with the housing authority, how are we using that to work with local attorneys who can help us, and the tenant union to help us work with immigrants in the community who are having issues with their landlords or having trouble paying for housing or in temporary or transitional housing. In terms of like any sort of solutions to those, I don't think that's something that we're working toward. And then with regard to the employment piece, I think that's a place where you as a student probably have a lot of power. So if you think about workforce development and inclusion, you think about skilled immigrant integration, and you think about international student retention, and you think about accreditation and credentialing. Those are things that you have power as a student to speak into, whether to the administration or to advocate for on behalf of immigrants in our community who are navigating that process, accompanying them along that process, or approaching different entities within the community. Those are things that I think, were you in chorus class last semester? I remember you. I would love to work with you. So, that's just like, I think, a very shallow treatment of it, but it's a start. I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
I think when we talked about accompanying, right, I think those are some, I mean, it's not going to give you employment, but it helps you navigate, again, the navigation of the different spaces, right? In terms of also putting a plug out there, we're trying to build the Maya Interpretation Collective, and it requires basically everybody in this county to work towards that, right? To maybe language access, right? Helping develop the idea that everybody needs to have not a screen, but needs to have somebody live there interpreting whatever language they are talking, right? Speaking, right? And that's a right, that's a human right, right? As well as housing and employment. And those are the things that I think we're all trying to figure out how to sustainably do with the communities, with our communities. The multiple overlapping communities. I hate saying the communities because it's also my community, but it overlaps in different ways, right? So yeah, making sure that access to education, right? So we're moving slowly, but I think we're all working to trying to do sustainable solutions to the very pressing issues that we cannot solve. They're structural. We need to, move along different, like that's what I'm saying, like we have to move internationally, locally, nationally. It requires a lot of different types of activism and kinds of engagement, right? For the time being, I think there's a lot of organizations asking for volunteers to help navigate the system here, and I think that's at least for the time being, again, it's a Band-Aid, but those Band-Aids matter, so.
Yeah, and I think just kind of reflecting on what is a skill set that you would like to bring into your allyship, together with learning and humility and constant engagement, because that looks really different across the community. So, when you talk about the Urbana Park District, allyship is incorporating welcoming and inclusion as one of the 4 pillars of their new strategic plan. When you talk about Ruth Wyman, who was in here earlier, it was helping us launch free legal clinics for the immigrant community that have been going on for almost a year now. It's when you talk about Representative Carol Ammon signing on as a co-sponsor of the RISE Act, it's like figuring out, what is this space that you fit in, and how can you use that and really leverage that as an ally?
With that, I want to thank everyone for coming and thank our panelists. Thank you so much.